People who have witnessed a death. What happened? Nothing is more scarring than comforting someone you love while seeing their light slowly go out. It's not instant, it's a slow process of everything shutting down. Man, this is a funny story and a horrible story at the same time. So headed home from the casino with my dad, mom, and girlfriend. We pull into his house and we see a freaking biker gang all rallied around our driveway. They had 1% patches and everything. They flag us down and my dad pulls into the driveway of our home and we try to figure out what's going on. Apparently, the biker gang was cruising down our street. This street leads to the beach, and one of the bikers hit a deer and flew through our steel fence. It was like an inch thick. I still think about someone going that and shuddering. We went and checked the person, and the only thing holding him together was his jacket and helmet. He was straight up mutilated. Police arrived shortly after and life flight landed in our backyard. My stepbrother and sister were supposed to have been home, but they never answered the door. We went inside and we finally found them holed up in the closet upstairs with like 8 butcher knives. Apparently they saw the bikers and went straight into hiding when the biker gang came knocking. For some reason I thought it was so funny that they were holed up like that. Like, what are you going to do with 8 knives? Attack them like Wolverines? A suicide bomber blew himself up near our house and I remember seeing a dead body on the street. Sat with my father for the last hour of his life. 2 days of death rattles cancer. He eventually took one last deep breath and didn't exhale. That was it. 10 years later in a department store, I hear a huge crack. Turn around and there's a guy lying on his back. Applied CPR for 20 minutes until the ambulance arrived. But I knew he was dead. His family later called me and told me he'd likely had a massive heart attack and was probably dead before he hit the tile fall like a felled tree. It had smashed the back of his skull like an egg. Every time I pressed on his chest I could see more blood coming out the back of his head. What to do? You do your best until the medics arrive. Store staff were completely useless. When I was 5, I was in a car accident. We hit a tree. I was in the back middle seat. My leg was broken. My dad, the driver, died instantly. My 2 cousins were fairly unharmed, as was my dad's girlfriend's daughter. I remember my leg being trapped behind the seat in front of me and my shoe had fallen off. There was a tiny trickle of blood coming from my dad's nose. Saw a guy get shot through the eye with a 30-30 after he robbed a store. Store owner squeezed one off, and the back of the guy's head just came apart. I was in my car. Opened door, puked, light turned green. I was with my mother, father, best friend who died of pancreatic cancer, and my grandmother when they passed. When all of these folks, it was in the middle of the night. I always take the night shift when people I love are near the end. All I can say is waiting for the last breath is hard. As the breathing slows you can tell they are going to go. In all cases it was like a weight of pain was lifted and they became still and peaceful. I am an atheist, and to me when they die, they are gone. What is left is not them anymore. I very much learned to appreciate people I love while they are here. To me, what we have is an all too brief moment of awareness in this world. The universe's way to observe itself. If there is a God or gods, and I am wrong, they have much to answer for. The pain my best mate went through with the pancreatic cancer affirmed for me that there is no loving God. I miss him. St. Patty's Day 1999. Witnessed one of my best friends get hit by a car. Saw her thrown in the air and land on the ground. When I got to her there was blood coming out of her ear and I knew it was a brain hemorrhage. Someone had called an ambulance and they really tried, but she died on scene. She was 18. One of the worst days of my life. Seeing her family at the hospital afterwards was devastating. My 5-year-old sister was run over by a car. It's haunted my whole life since. My mom died of dementia. I was with her as she took her last breath, and I will tell you, she SAW something in her last moment that was incredible. It was like someone opened a door and she said woo and she was just gone. Nothing particularly extreme, but my grandfather was taken off life support while we were in the room. He didn't breathe on his own and had no brain activity, so there wasn't much to see in the moment. But when you come back after a little while and the body starts yellowing, that's harrowing. Feels like it happens so fast. I was with my grandmother when she passed away. She wanted to die for a long time and was freed with it from a lot of pain. It was a very humbling, emotionally challenging, but also beautiful, intimate experience that is hard for me to put into words. I'm still very grateful I was able to be there for her. Edit. Trying to find the right wording, which seems impossible. I'm a first responder firefighter EMR, so death is something I witness relatively frequently. Worst I can think of was a motorcycle vs car accident. Patient had no trauma anywhere except on his head, no helmet. About a fist-sized hole in the back of his head. You'll never forget the amount of blood coming from his eyes, ears, and head. Left a good amount of brain matter at the scene. Did CPR all the way to the hospital, even though I was certain he was DRT. But he was very young, so we weren't about to give up. Obviously he didn't make it. Luckily he was an organ donor, and we kept enough perfusion to save his organs. So we may not have saved him, but we saved someone, multiple someones actually. Saw a motorcycle crash when my family and I were going somewhere. It was a bad crash, but he got up until he took off his helmet, then he just collapsed. It was in an article later that the motorcyclist died. My uncle, who died of metastatic cancer in his early 70s. In his last moments, he sat a little more upright in the hospital bed and shook his fist, then made gestures as though he was shooting at something none of us could see. Had been the paragon of health, ran marathons, never drank or smoked, and generally took excellent care of himself. He was understandably bitter in his diagnosis and remained so until the end. It haunted my aunt and cousins that he was not at peace in his final moments. My grandmother, who was in hospital for lung surgery, said, yes to no one in particular, and simply went to sleep, no pain and no anguish. She was 91 and had been in poor health for the last year of her life, so we like to think she was agreeing to whomever it was that it was perhaps her time. Saw a pedestrian get hit by a tractor trailer. It was bad, she was decapitated, and the smell was something I will never forget. I was in my office, at my desk. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something just a blur really out the window. Got up to have a look. A man had jumped from the 12th floor. Dozens. I'm an ER doctor. I've seen people die in many ways. Saw an inmate die after being stabbed maybe a dozen times with pinking shears by other inmates. Lasted maybe 15 minutes before there was no more blood for his heart to pump. Saw a guy that was one of my dad's friends after he got his head run over by a cement truck. He was riding on his bike and fell off when he was next to a cement truck that was passing. His head was totally flat. Saw him as we were driving past and the cops were just arriving. Only other time was when my dad died in the hospital from liver and kidney failure. It took him several days to pass. I was getting ready to leave to drive home after staying overnight with my grandma and sister in the hospital. My sister told me to say goodbye to him because he might not make it until I was planning on coming back the next day. I went and said my piece and held his hand. He started doing the agonal breathing right after, which clued us in that it was his time. My grandma and sister said their goodbyes and shortly after he died.